Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good day, good life to you. Welcome back to the LAMDA log. This is week 8, day 2, Tuesday, the 10th of March, 2026. So it was a rehearsal day. We also had an intimacy lesson from an intimacy coordinator and director. So I'll get into that. That'll be most of my notes, actually. So we warmed up in John Wood, and then we moved straight to El Caballero with Ollie, and Jess warmed us up. We played Zip Zap Zoo, but a simple version where we mostly just did zip and zap, and then we added zoo. I got to the final, and then I lost because I'm not very good. But I was in the final, so there's that. Then we walked the space, and we rotated our wrists and then our elbows and then our shoulders and then our ankles and our knees and our hips and then our waists. And then I presented on Catholicism for the group, and I felt really good and that I nailed it. And the people who grew up Catholic in the class, they're like, that's right, that's right. I always have an inclination when speaking about religion to like justify things or explain why my theology is different and be like, the world hates Eve, but we think that we believe in the fortunate fall, that it was part of God's plan for Eve to partake of the fruit, and she did a brave and noble thing to allow us to fall, to allow us to learn. But alas, I didn't think it was the place. And then we had a presentation on music, and Spanish playwrights often wrote songs or used songs for their plays. Music was starting to be written down for the first time, and it was earning notoriety for that because it wasn't just this colloquial thing, but it was this high art. Lots of string instruments, the precursor to the guitar, and some other instruments. One that looked very much like a cello, but I think had 6 strings or 7. There was a culture of group singing to women. And so the guy would bring like a bunch of guys to the window of the woman he wanted to woo, and he'd sing. And then there was kind of like some different types of songs, like ensaladas, which means salads technically, but it's like mixed voice. It has a bunch of funny things and different ideas. And then there were lullabies and work songs, which is what a shanty is. I didn't realize this, but a shanty was like to set the pace for people to work at the same beat. I thought it was just to pass the time. How like the hymns of the enslaved peoples in the Americas was also like to pass messages and stuff, which is fascinating. I hope I'm speaking loud enough. I am tired. Yeah, tired. Anyway, so there was also a town crier who would sing the news every day, and sometimes they would thank God and have like a prayer as part of it. And then we worked on a scene with Ollie, which was wonderful. Some great ideas to work on. These were my king scenes, and so it was to find the matador in the king, and that this argument, because all my scenes with the queen are arguments, and that these arguments happen every day, and it's like, oh, again, what are we doing? So I'm thinking of, I want to find a physicality in something that's regal and noble, but worn out and tired, and I don't know. I'm thinking it's kind of downturn. My people. I don't know. I'm working on that a little bit. Then we had lunch, and then when we got back, we learned about the Reconquista, and we had an in-depth history lesson, and it was fascinating just to see how, with the Iberian Peninsula, you had like Portugal here and the rest of it, how North Africa and the North African Caliphate came and took over most of the Iberian Peninsula, and then they left a little northern section of the Visigoth Christians. But then, like when Rome got behind the Visigoths, they sort of pushing them down. But then there was a French influence on Aragon, and so there was like Castilla with what came from the Visigoths, Aragon, and then Granada, which was what was left of the Islamic rule. So you had these three kingdoms, and then they were like fighting for 1,000 years. And then, um, in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but also the Reconquista finished because Isabella and Fernando, the Catholic monarchy, they were able to recapture Granada and finalize the Catholic union of Spain, of the whole of the Iberian Peninsula. Yeah, but fascinating things. There's it was this political, religious conquering and cleansing of the Iberian Peninsula. And how do we define nationhood? We talked about this. It's like, do you need a foundational myth, right? El Cid is a famous Spanish myth about this noble knight who conquered the Iberian Peninsula, and he did all these great things. But the actual person it's based on, they found like historic record that he was just a mercenary, and he fought for the the North African Islamic people as much as he did for the Catholic Christians, and as much as he did for the French. He just went wherever he was paid. But he's this like, there's this epic poem of El Cid, and so it's fascinating to think what I idealize and everything, and it's like, and we're kind of missing those myths. And I think Trump is becoming that in America, or became that. And that was part of his coming to power, was he represented something more than just man. He was, because if you go into like the QAnon things, and he was going to be this great revealer of truth and everything. And then Churchill. And we're in this age of so much information, and these myths struggle to exist because things are all open, and we see people as people, not as these mythical creatures and these mythical, almost godlike people, these deities. It's like Hercules, right? Part man, part god. But a critical specific story, wonderful. We worked on part 3, scene 1, the raging bull, and I need to find the bite, that jealousy that brings out. Oh no, that was just a note for someone else, but I liked that. Find the bite that jealousy brings out. But I need to constantly hold this never-ending fight. It's always there, and I'm just like, yeah, we've talked about this. I've done what you said, because it feels like the king has ultimately more power. He has final say on things, but he is doing a lot what the queen says. So it's interesting. Very, very interesting. And then we had our intimacy session. So this was guided by Christina Fulcher. She's an American who is certified. Well, I'll just read my notes. So we first divided like the classroom, the studio, into like our doing space and our learning space. So our learning space was by the screen, where she had some slides projected, and then behind we had some doing space where we would practice and do different activities. And so we went to the doing space to do a name, pronouns, and an action and a sound that we would then repeat of how we felt. And then Christina she trained as a dancer and an actor in musical theater. She got intimacy certification in 2019. We discussed what we already know with a partner, and what we want to gain. This does not quantify or certify us to do or teach these things. This is just information. We were said to take any break we need, just like as we leave, give a thumbs up so she knows nothing's wrong. If something is wrong or we're struggling, we can go thumbs down. If we go without signifying, she just assumes that it's a thumbs down, and she'll share that with Ollie. We had some community agreements and outlines that this is an invitation to add intimacy guidelines to our practice, right? Leave the story, take the learning. So anything that she specifically said, like anecdotal, don't share that because those are personal things. Speak from an I instead of sharing other people's experiences or things. Just talk from yourself. Respect the generosity, respect and generosity to others and self, and reserve the right to speak in draft, right? As we're forming what we want to say, it's okay to say things wrong and speak in draft and lend people that grace. Shout out Sandridge. I'm extremely thirsty this morning too. I just feel dehydrated. So when you have dance, you have a choreographer or a movement director. When you have a fight in a scene, you have a fight director or stunt coordinator. Um, and when you have simulated sex, nudity, or intimate content, you should have an intimacy director or an intimacy coordinator. Because dance and fight choreographer or director is protecting against physical injury, and for an intimacy director or an intimacy coordinator, you're protecting against physical, emotional, and psychological injury. But that's why it's necessary and important. So an intimacy director is for live theater. They're really involved in the rehearsal process. An intimacy coordinator is for screen, and 90% of what they do is done in the pre-production to set them up for success, to know they have the right people and the right processes involved. When you ask for an intimacy coordinator or director, these are times when you can't, when you should, right? If there's implied nudity, right? Like if you're under the sheets, but you're covered. When there's partial nudity, right? It could be buttocks or upper chest or whatever it may be. Full nudity, simulated sex, fertility, breastfeeding, IVF, a self-pleasure scene, a urinating, or medical procedures, anything where you get very intimate with a person and two actors, especially if they don't know what they're doing, like in medical situations, it's important to have that intimacy coordinator there to just advocate for people and make sure that people are safe and comfortable. And then in times where you may or may not have one is if there's a familial parent or child relationships, kind of like incestual things, because that could be touch and go. And if it doesn't involve any of the things I mentioned before, then not. And sometimes you just have one when there's minors involved, just so that you keep things above board, like for everything and anything. Collaboration with a fight choreographer is if there's like sexual violence or non-consensual intimacy. And then we talked a little bit about kissing and alternatives, which like if you have an intimate moment, I think this is what this part was. It's a filler in. So during the rehearsal process before someone's come in, or if you're doing a tech rehearsal where you have to do something over and over again, you can just like do a high five or a cheek to cheek for the kiss or something. Yeah. And then the pillars of intimacy are communication, context, which is scene story, serve the story and the character, choreography, and closure. So first with communication, it should be open, ongoing, transparent, and constant. What that says, wow, I butchered that. Clear is kind, right? So be clear with people. Um, Personal versus professional. Keep things personal. Keep personal anecdotes to yourself. Like if you're doing a kissing scene, don't be like, yeah, this is how I kiss my girlfriend or my wife, or this is what I do with them or that. Because then it just adds a layer that is unprofessional and strange and makes weird connections. So keep everything professional. The human first approach is treat people as humans, and sometimes they need things. Um, Continued coordination and director involvement, help them be there. Um, Equity policy, and keeping it. Oh, this is just actual equity, like the union. And professional working space is there's just certain rules about what to do and what you can't do. Sorry, I feel like I'm speaking and walking through molasses. I'm just like, wow, wow, wow. Because I got to get to the school at 8 in the morning. And right now it's 6:21. So I woke up at 5, but I went to sleep at midnight. So my body is sore. We're going through it. We're doing it. We have intimacy guidelines specifically at LAMDA as well that Christina helped shape and write. Then we played Simon Says, and we kind of noticed that it's like, oh, there was no trick. It was just Simon Says, do this, do this, do this, like do all the things, and it was all Simon Says, and we all just kind of did it, you know. And then she said, there's no conversation, there's an expectation. And so we talked about that you can say no. She's like, you have the option to either just not participate or you can vocally say no. And she's like, yeah, just Simon Says do this, Simon Says do that. She mentioned like rubbing your bum crack. And that's where everyone was like, no. And then you can do this and say no. This is and then she replaced it with the word button, because that's kind of a cue word that just helps everyone like stop and know what's going on. So yeah, that was a good, just kind of physicalizing it. And then we talked about a self care cue, which is what that was. It's a word or a physical gesture, like our exit strategy with the thumbs up or thumbs down. And then time to hold and take a moment. So if you can be like button and be like, yeah, wait, I just need a second to make sure I know what I'm doing before the scene, or like whatever. And usually this is for rehearsal, but it can be used in other situations. Examples of buttons that she's used were button, pink, pineapple, flamingo. They've had different things. Flamingo, like a really tall one. But something that's just outside of the world of the play or scene or film or whatever. And then something that's not mundane, so not like Tesco, right? And then make sure new people know the word and the gesture when they arrive. And then number 2, context, understanding the script, storytelling, and character. Read the script and know what you are willing to learn and to do. What is my consent level? What do you want to or not want to do? Think it through and come prepared. You should have 48 hours before intimacy work to be prepared. 3, consent. CRISP is the acronym. CRISP, consent is considered, right? It's think and talk about it. It's reversible. It can be shortened or tweaked or changed. It's informed. Be honest, be open. You don't have to like explain yourself, but like if you are uncomfortable with something, just say you are. Right? You don't have to say because of this experience or whatever. You can just say I'm not comfortable with that. It's specific. Consent is given per moment, and it's participatory. Be conversational about your body. Yeah, so it's CRISP, considered, reversible, informed, specific, participatory. Boundaries are the statements. Consent is the conversation. I like that. Agreement, right, are boundaries, and consent is that communication. It's that ongoing thing. Consent is a process, not a moment. Continually check in for consent. Your no is a gift. If I know where your no is, then I can trust your yes. Consent is non-binary. It's not black and white. There is, you know, that liveness to it, right? It can change and it can flow and be different things. No and yes are full statements. Look into the consent iceberg, the yes to no spectrum, right? Then we played our game, which was the yes and no game. So you got in a circle, you say someone's name. We played this at the very beginning when the first week of school. But we look at someone, we say, Sarah, for example. And then Sarah can say yes. And then you walk over and you stand by them. And then they look at someone and they say, Bob. And Bob says yes. And then Sarah can leave and you replace their spot. But you can't move until the person you look at says yes. So even though someone's come to replace you, you have to wait. And then we added no. And so you just say thank you. And then move to the next person. Savannah, whomever. And then we added qualifications. You could say yes, but can you shimmy? Or yes, but can you do the worm, or like whatever it may be. And we had a good laugh. Some things I did this silly little walk. I got a good chuckle. Number 3, choreography. Only have necessary bodies on set and only essentials, right? It's good to have a note taker, which is an intimacy captain frequently, because it should be choreographed, it should be straight up, right? But if for example you're doing a scene with nudity, you don't want like a whole crew of like 50 people just there. You want only who needs to be there. Before you're on set, have a rehearsal. That can save so much time. And then have an intimacy call before a show and a scene, just the same way you would have a fight call, just to check in, make sure that everything is comfortable, because there might be injuries, there might be emotional baggage on something, and you don't want to hurt someone. So you can adapt and check in. Warm up is important to prepare yourself. Be present and open-minded. And it's important to use anatomical language so that it doesn't minimize and it doesn't flippantize it. It's just what it is, right? Use breasts instead of boobs, or buttocks instead of bum, etc. And don't refer to the section of like the sex scene or whatever other foul language you may hear or expect. And then if someone like refers, it's like, oh, you ready for the sex scene? Then you can say act 1. Yeah, I'm super excited for act 1 scene 2 or whatever. Right. And then a little bit more into that placeholder gesture you can use during rehearsals, and it helps to allow for improvising without intimacy, right? So you can stay alive in the scene and stuff, but not worry that, oh, this kiss is coming, or this whatever scene, or this whatever moment. And so you can have this like high five. And then the action should be non-intimate. So not a hug, just because that has its own intimacy. It's like at the lowest level of intimacy. Is that true? Yeah, ish. But yeah, and then it's much better when things are blocked out and only the intimacy needs to be added when the intimacy coordinator or director gets on set. There always needs to be a third party person there. The director should be there as well, but it shouldn't just be like, go choreograph this and come back, because that creates power dynamics, which is what we did a little bit in Tis Pity, but it was also our choice. We weren't like told to do that per se, which I think is a little better, but there should be a third party there to make it above board and it's not a romantic thing. It's not like an individual thing. It's a professional choreograph thing. Don't go away by just, oh, actors, yeah, yeah, and come back with what you've done. Then we did a boundary check-in. Um, and so you talk about like what you're comfortable. We did the red light, green light things, just to like show on your body what is okay to be touched and what isn't. And it may be different for different people. So I was in a trio, and so we did it individually with both people, because of course that just makes sense. And then there's some sort of like contact. So like hug to connect is what it's called. And there's 8 options. You put your hands like this and you touch, and that's kind of like your check-in. You can do a clavicle hug, which is like the auntie hug, where like you only touch upper chest, it's like hi kind of a thing, but it's not like full hug. It's like "Eh." Then there's a full hug, like a full just like frontal hug, and then there's a side hug, and then there's elbow touch, and then there's forearm and back of hands, so like that, and then um, oh, there's the warrior, which you don't really touch, but you kind of get on a warrior stance where it's like a lunge. So you lean forward, your knee is bent, and your feet can touch, but you just kind of lean for each other. And then circle, where your arms go like this, but on the outside. So it's like, yeah, let me practice those a little bit. Think of choreo as ingredients or an agreed framework. An agreed to framework. Choreo can range from specific to just like a frame, right? It depends on who's comfortable with what and what you've agreed on and where the consent is, because yeah, to do everything very clinically and technically is great. That's one way to do it, but if there's comfort and you can have like looser things, it's like, well, we're going to start here kissing and then we're going to switch and kiss that side. Um, or whatever. But it can also just be a framework. It's like we're gonna kiss here and then um, bring your arm down and then hold the hand. And it could be specific. It's like we'll kiss here for 2 counts and then we'll switch sides for 2 counts. And then I'll take my hand on your face and then I'll bring it down your shoulder and then it will go down your arm and hold your hand. Or you can just have, we'll kiss for 4 counts and then I'll hold your hand, kind of a thing. We talked about different levels of touch. One is like powder, it's kind of very soft. Then like 3 is like a face paint. I think it was 3. It's either 3 or 5, but I think it was 3. I think 5 was the highest. And then there's sculpture, like a massage. That's a 5 touch or a 10. And then we talked about different ways you can like think of these things, right? Of this touch. And the choreography, you can think of Laban efforts, you can think of elements, animals, sculpture, artwork. Lecoq, 7 levels of tension, music and rhythm, right? And then lastly is closure, right? Number 4. And this is warming down, de-rolling back to self. So shake out, you can stretch, you can stand under a waterfall or kind of think of that idea. And it's just like getting yourself out of it, leaving that character and those feelings and moment. And then that was it. And she shared her information and she said she's open for questions. And that's what I got for you guys today. That was one of the long days. I think I'm staying late at the school like every day this week. So life is great. Happy to be here. Love you lots. See you tomorrow. Bye.